Hey guys, got a clicker because I requested it specifically. I don't know if anyone else is going to be using this, but it's fun, and I might even ding when I go through each slide, like the picture books you used to have as a kid. I am a kid stuck in an adult-sized meat sack. And for the low, low price of just sitting in your seats today, you too can become this. And believe me, if you're interested in proofing out your autonomy today, which is what we're all doing today, you'll want to consider also tackling your own kid-mindedness today. And yes, it's still there. It's inside of you. Because this kid-mindedness that I've had to wrestle back inside of my adult life as a creative director is a proto-autonomy. It's like the OG sense of independence and self-direction we use to form ourselves into maturity from a young age. It's a lot like what we consider autonomy as adults, but it's a pure and more naturally accessible form. Boop. It's that pure and more naturally accessible form that adults don't respect, though. Kids live out their autonomy in a core and visceral ways that adults like you and me tend to balk at. Yet, why is being creative in the workplace, why is fostering a kid-like, unrestrained thinking to solve problems in Silicon Valley, at Google, why, like in such high demand, why is this such a prominent mode of thinking for our employees now in progressive industries? At its best, how did kid-mindedness rocket humanity out into the music of the spheres in a big metal tube to plant a moon flag and walk around on a spacesuit and bounce around? At its least, what did kid-mindedness, what does it have to do with our own confidence daily, or success, or even having a healthy excitement about our daily tasks? If you're interested in wrestling it back into your adult self today, there are two ways to think about kid-mindedness, this kid-mindedness, to help you do that. One is imagination. We're all familiar with that. And second, it's a little term I've coined called zone of play. Ding! I love imagination. I use it as a platform to solve problems for clients and in my own life whenever and wherever I can. And not simply like practical solutions, but elegant, weird, exhilarating solutions with staying power, with impression. Imagination makes me more believable. It makes you take me seriously, especially when the stuff that I'm proposing to do for you would be otherwise considered child's play. Again, for the low, low price of sitting in your seats, you too can become this. Here's why imagination makes me, and can make you, more believable. Practicality cannot assault your decisions when it comes to imagination. As well, you can't be reasoned into submission or control. This is one of the main operating points for why imagination makes up a huge chunk of autonomy formation when we're young. I mean, think about it. Kids are not a practical people. Kids are intrinsically an impractical people. Acting solely on their imagination is awesome. So don't encroach that, adults. Don't reason it away. This is kid-mindedness on a core and visceral level. It's protecting itself so that kids can retain their own sense of being in a world in which adults seem to have integrated so programmatically and strictly. Now, as adults, don't think because we're the adults in the room that we're in the clear in some way, shape, or form. We categorically attribute the thinking of a child as lacking in self-control, discipline, and all other executive functions of the brain that we consider paramount to operating in the real world. Because the real world doesn't run on imagination, it runs on knowledge. And acting on imagination only is foolish without knowing the right adult stuff. Because you'll look foolish without knowing all the right adult stuff. Or worse, you'll look grossly idealistic. Nobody wants that. Believe me, if you're in a high-powered meeting with high-powered executives, gross idealism is the last thing you want to display to them. You want to display that you know what you're doing. You want to build that confidence. This is where zone of play comes in. It swoops in to save that kid-mindedness. I love zone of play as much as I love imagination, just soul imagination for yourself. In a zone of play, your thoughts and actions are fundamentally self-directing. I'll explain that in a second. As well, in this thing called zone of play, you're provided with these mental horse blinders that free you from social unease. So what is zone of play? It's simply when someone else is willing to join in your imagination with their imagination. Two kids are in a wash tub, and one kid says to the other, can we bring the slide back up? Yeah. If two kids are on a wash tub, like in this picture, and one kid says, hey, this broomstick, it's the paddle, it's the boat paddle. Zone of play occurs when the other kid responds, yeah, this piece of wood, it's the other paddle. Now we're in a boat. And now, no one feels out of place. Because imagination is no longer some secret bulwark of the mind, protecting from the throes of an established adult practicality that seems to be creeping in on you as a child. It's now the foundation of your more adult executive functioning. You learn as a child in those zone of play moments how to be self-controlled, how to be self-willed. You learn autonomy. It's a proto-autonomy by working it out alongside others that care about what you think, what you believe, and essentially and eventually who you are. And believe me, if you're interested in proofing out your own autonomy today, which is what we're all doing, it's the theme of this TEDx, you'll want to consider these 3 weird tips I'm about to give you. Everybody gives 3 tips at a TEDx talk. I've got 3 of them, just like everyone else. I'm not very imaginative, am I? Number 1, give yourself permission to dismiss practicality. Your imagination will thrive if you do this. You won't worry about what's going to work and what's not going to work. This is the basis, the foundation of kid-mindedness itself. It doesn't need to be initially or solely helpful or operative. It needs to be innovative and strange and revitalizing. While rationality and pragmatism are great at convincing people of something, adults do this all the time, we reason things out, they're not great at motivating people to do something. You motivate people when what you're doing vivifies them, gives them life. 2, give yourself permission to be completely wrong. Because once you enter into a zone of play with anyone around you to solve any problem in any circumstance, in that zone of play, you're both safe. You're both free to build off one another, even regardless of with what you're building or what are you building. It doesn't matter because the absurdity of it is safe. You're protected from it. No one can encroach that. For many of us, especially in our jobs, adhering to expectations makes the day go easier for everyone. We can maneuver and politic. It's a tactic. It's a social tactic. And it helps us look good. We look like we know what we're doing. But what's really happening is we have zero idea what we're doing. And we're toiling away at giving the appearance that we know what we're doing, that we're making the right decisions under this big protective heft of all the right data, the right adult stuff. We're data-driven creatures when we get older. We process this data, all this stuff we know, into information. And then we use that information and make what we like to call wise decisions. So what happens when you don't aim for making a so-called wise decision? What happens when you give yourself permission to be completely wrong in your trajectory? And what happens when you invite other people under this protective heft of not all the right information, but instead of possibility, of inventiveness, of gross idealism? I'll tell you what happens, because that's my job. I'm up here doing that. You and everyone you just invited into that safety zone are having a lot more fun figuring it out together. People feel safe to toss out crazy, delusional ideas when you give them permission to be completely wrong. So give yourself permission to be completely wrong and invite others into that. Refresh others with that. My third, final tip, seems kind of easy since we're talking about imagination. Give yourself permission to pretend. We don't actually do that a lot. Once you allow yourself to believe you're just a kid stuck in an adult-sized meat sack, you'll find that living out your autonomy, your proto-autonomy, the more pure and natural sense of self you were made to live through, prompts others to question. They're intrigued by that color of freedom, that independence and self-direction you so casually issue. And if they're intrigued enough, it's your very practical and adult, real-world responsibility to help them remember that they have access to that same freedom too. Thank you.